G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns who are going to be the point of differences in your Keeper Leagues. As per usual, I'm joined by my co-host Kays. How are you, mate?
Good evening, Ryan. I'm well. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm feeling especially good because I'm drinking this Tapachi kombucha, Remedy kombucha. So,
Cha-ching.
Yeah, so... Remedy Kombucha has been good enough to send us a shitload of kombucha to drink. And we're drinking that in the show. So if you're watching the videos or, having a look at the podcast, you can always think about the Remedy Kombucha, I guess.
Now, I'm a kombucha man, but I've never had a tapache before. So I'm going to...
It's a classic little pineapple flavour. It's a nice little number
Mexican beverage. Righto, here we go.
Yeah.
Refreshing.
Yeah, it's not too bad, is it?
Yeah.
It's actually, they're good if I always find them they're good if you just don't want to have a beer, but you don't have a soft drink at the same time. So you don't want the sugar, but you want something a bit more savoury.
You've got all responsible in your old age, and I really don't like it.
No, it's because I had children, and just hangovers are just a no-go zone anymore. So, yeah, that's basically it.
Anyway, enough life lessons here. Let's get into the
Drink Remedy Kombucha.
You've sold your soul.
If only we're getting paid for this.
I know, I wish.
Anyway.
I'll take free kombucha, though.
Yeah, we'll take the freebies. All right, let's talk about the weekend, I guess. So I went to the Port trial on Friday night. Caught up with I was sitting in the grandstand in the back row by myself with a notepad like a real dick, just taking notes. And it was half time, and I looked down to the beer lineup, and I saw Doss from the Draft Doctors. So I took a real creepy photo of him and then sent it to him. And then he was looking around trying to spot where I was. Then I went down and surprised him, and I met up with Louis and Checkers from Lane Kicking podcast as well. So I never met those guys before, but we had a good chat and watched the second half together, and talked about who we thought was some fantasy relevant players. But the main standouts case.
Who are they?
Well, on the night, it was Dan Houston. Everyone's raving about him, but he just kind of lived up to that hype. I know it was only a trial against yourself, and there was 6 midfielders playing, and the depth was really stretched. But God, he looked good. He looked like they're just Port's number one midfielder. So I think Ken Hinckley's pretty keen to get the ball in his hands and make him number one.
Beautiful. Who else? Any other Keeper League relevant guys?
Yeah, look, Connor Rosie is, I guess he was only, a 60 average forward last year, high 60 averaging forward last year. He looks like he's going to play a lot of midfield minutes. I think he had the first 2 clearance. He definitely had the first clearance. I think he had one a few minutes later as well. He looks pretty good to go in the midfield there. Another surprising one was Carl Amon. So a player who's, usually a bit more of an outside type. He was attending a lot of centre bounces and playing quite inside. So I don't know if that role will continue in the season. I don't know whether it was just, they're stretching out their midfielders or, they're trying some other people on the wings and that. But because it looked like Butters and Dersma were running up and down the wings as well. So that could be something a bit different or something to watch out for if Carl Amon does move into the midfield.
So when are Port playing this weekend? Are they playing this? Yeah, Sunday.
Yeah,
Sunday versus
afternoon.
Brisbane. So
yep.
It's a nice one to watch there.
Yeah.
Where do we start? We're starting on Thursday night with St Kilda and Hawthorn. So the real research begins this weekend.
Pretty much, yeah. All the stuff that we've said, prior to this episode goes out the window, and now we have to just look at some...
No, it doesn't go out the window. It just gets finely tuned. Tuned.
Fair enough.
Worked too hard for this not to be relevant anymore.
That's true. And last week we talked about, in passing, we didn't even think it would turn into anything, but we talked about Bad Dreams re-recording the Port Adelaide song for this year, and they've actually... one of our listeners has actually been in touch with them, and they've gotten in touch with us, and I guess they're keen to do it. So we're trying to talk Port Adelaide into getting it done. I don't know whether that includes paying for a recording session or something. I don't know how it works, or getting their media team involved. But basically, we want you guys, as our listeners, just to annoy Port Adelaide.
Yes, please.
Tweet David Koshi. Koshi started following us on the back of it, which is...
Is he our most famous follower now?
Oh, he'd be up there, yeah.
Apart from Bad Dreams.
We've got a direct line to the boss, so I can really tell him what I think about Ken Hinckley. So
no. Let's get this project done first, then you can go all feral hef on him.
That's fair enough. Yeah, we probably should stay in his good books for a while. Okay. But yeah, listeners, if you're keen to get Bad Dreams keen to help us get Bad Dreams, re-record the Port Adelaide song. Just tweet Port Adelaide, tweet Koshi, tag Bad Dreams in it, and hopefully they take some notice. 2
Adelaide greats. Well, an Adelaide great band and a so-so football club, but
Yep. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, I was just trying to toe the party line there. But anyway, we've rabbled enough at the start. Now let's get stuck into our league spotlight for the week. We've got Jeremy from Adelaide, local boy, here to tell us about his Keeper League. All right, I'm joined by Jeremy from Adelaide, local boy, hometown, SA, born and bred. How you going, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, man. You're here to tell us about your Keeper League?
Yeah, mate. Meet my sensei. That's what we call ourselves. I'm not really sure exactly where that name came from, but we are the Meet My Sensei League.
Nice. And how long's it been running for?
We started in 2013. What it pretty much was a lot of us boys were commissioners of other leagues, like the one-year leagues.
Yep.
We were all kind of in each other's leagues, and then we sort of heard the concept of keeper leagues, and we sort of got all the commissioners from all our other leagues together and just formed this sort of elite group of commissioners.
Yeah, nice.
And started. We didn't really know what to expect from keeper leagues because it was all pretty new back in those days, but yeah, we had our initial draft, and there was a few absolute howlers in that, I can tell you. James Swan at pick 1 was pretty nasty.
Yep.
27 years of age or something. So some went old and some went young, and that's played out over the last 7 years.
Okay. Well, tell us about your league. How's it structured? What about squad sizes, keeper numbers, all that sort of stuff? List changes.
So we have squads of 36, which is pretty big.
Yep.
18 players on field, so it's 5 backs, 5 mids. I can't remember, but it's 18 players. We've got 1 utility,
yep.
a ruck, 5 emergencies. We've got a pretty big bench, so we only change over 6 players per year.
Okay. Yep.
So we keep the majority. We keep 30 players a year and change over 6. So we have 10 coaches, a 60 pick draft. We've kind of come to understand the importance of the draft and trading over the journey.
Yep.
Remember early on, we didn't really know what was going on. I think someone traded pick 1 for Taylor Walker
oh dear.
in year 1, which is pretty nasty. But now it's all about the trading and bliss management. That's been the real joy of the keeper league world.
Yeah, nice. So when you get to your draft, I guess you have like a fairly, I guess your talent pool is probably dropping down a bit there. So you're picking up the, I guess the young guns. You're going to pick up your Matt Rouse and stuff like that early this season. Is that how it works?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So our top 10 is generally very close to the AFL's top 10, but obviously with more mids and
fantasy
players of relevance. The pool that's left over in our league, because we have so many players, we have 360 players taken up. So the pool of available players is pretty nasty.
Yep.
There's not much in there, man.
Yeah. So
the draft is crucial. No one's getting any decent pool pickups out of there. So we do put a lot of sort of weight on the draft, especially as we've got coaches that are at various leagues, at various positions in their rebuild and in their premiership window. So, we do live pick trading. We trade a lot of picks as coaches, give their veterans to the teams in the window.
Yep, sounds familiar.
And then we move the young guys around, and it's all taken quite seriously by us lads, actually.
All right, let's keep it moving. So, do you have a premiership cup? Is it named after anyone? What's the story there?
We've got a cup. It's not named after anyone specifically.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal because none of the wives really want it in the house.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
We've got this litany of different bizarre trophies for all these different awards we hand out. We have a Rising Star and All-Australian team and whatever else. So there's sort of cups and trophies all over the joint, but no one really wants to have them in their house.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
We've got a championship ring for the MVP. We have an MVP for the most valuable coach off the field.
Yep.
Who's brought the most energy and the most sort of enjoyment and fun and we have a speech every year where we just hang it on everybody for how useless they were or how good they were.
That's great.
As a member of the league.
Yep. We always
threaten to relegate coaches if they don't show up and bring their best stuff.
Yeah, nice.
So, no, it's all good.
All right. What about, we talked about premiership cups. What about punishments, wooden spooners, stuff like that? What's the go there? You got anything like that?
We've got a wooden spoon. We don't. The wooden spooner has to pay for the engraving on all the cups, and generally has to pay for. We have a Mad Monday, and the wooden spooner has to kind of pay for the premier's dinner and drinks and whatever else. But we tend to punish the winner of the league more than the loser.
Okay, it's different.
One of the big problems that we had in our league was equalisation. Some of the coaches just howled it up on the initial draft, and they've just been hanging. They've just been at the bottom for years and years and years. So, the good coaches and the bad coaches kind of said sort of, rose and fell, and so we had to put in a bunch of different things to equalise the league.
Yep.
We make the premier draft like the worst player in the AFL pretty much every year with their last pick, so they have like a spot on their list that they can't use. We had Zach Dawson as the nominee for 4 or 5 years.
That's the first person that came to mind. Yeah,
I know, poor bloke. And now we've moved it to Nathan Brown. I don't think he's scored higher than 30 or 40 in the last couple of years either. So but Nathan Brown's getting on. So we're going to be looking for a new howler at some point.
Oh, there's plenty out there, mate. I'm sure you'll find one.
Yeah, we'll be able to pick one, that's for sure. But equalisation has been a rabbit hole we've had to deal with. Just trying to keep everyone going.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a task there. But anyway, do you have any other funny stories or anyone you want to hang shit on from your league?
Oh, we've got a lot of stuff we've done over the years. We've all do merchandise for all our teams. We've got home and away Guernsey that we've made up for our teams, and we've just got so many different things we do. We have a group chat which is a pretty infamous group chat. It kind of gets a couple of hundred messages a day on it throughout the season. Had a couple of rage chat quits, Davey Warner style.
You sure we're not in the same league, mate? Sounds very familiar here.
Yeah. We fight like a bunch of schoolgirls from Babysitters Club, mate. We
Absolutely.
Fight, we bicker.
Yep.
We can't get any league change, any rule changes over the line. We can go 2 years just arguing about the most bizarre, minuscule things you can imagine.
Yep.
And these little tips, sometimes they spill over into the real world. I went to the footy once and all the lads just ghosted me, didn't tell me they were there.
Oh, jeez.
But no, we're actually we're all pretty good mates.
Yeah.
In the group chat, we had this kind of unofficial competition going as to who could drop the most inappropriate news, like the most shocking news.
Yep.
And I remembered I announced one of my wife's pregnancies in there like really early, like before I'd even told my parents or my family. It was pretty awkward. And we use the group chat for some pretty hilarious stuff. But I think the problem with our league is we've just got too many commissioners in the one league.
Yep.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly.
And no one wants to be commissioner. Like, we've got this not my commissioner hashtag going. One of our commissioners decided that he would only communicate with the league via Emperor Palpatine GIFs and memes.
Okay.
Just he wouldn't talk to us. So I don't know. It's all pretty crazy, mate. You know what it's like, the rabbit hole of keeper leagues.
Absolutely, mate.
Bunch of bored grown men who just have not much else to do, and we love it, mate.
For sure, mate. Know it all too well, and it sounds eerily familiar, your league, and especially the group chat stuff as well. But we might have to leave it there, mate. Thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for supporting us and everything. And take it easy.
Love it, mate. Cheers.
Thanks to Jeremy for that one. That wraps up our league spotlights for this year, because as we get into the March series, we're going to need all the time we can get to actually talk about those. So thanks to everyone who, took a phone call from me and let me rabble on about or asking you questions about your keeper league. It's been much appreciated and helps us fill some content on the show.
But I know that all the listeners actually like it too. A lot of people are getting some good ideas from the league spotlights. So it's something we like doing, because we do like hearing all the stories of what's happening out there, and also gives our league a few ideas going forward. So
absolutely.
Rip a little segment, Hef.
All right, we're 13 minutes into this podcast and we haven't started talking about a team yet, so we better get stuck in. First up, who we got, Kays?
It is Sydney, Hef.
Cheer, cheer the red and the white.
All right, Kays, first up this week, we've got the Sydney Swans. So you're going to take us through their best 22, and I'll try to pick it apart as best as I can.
Rightio. So from the back line, Will Gould, Dane Rampy, Callum Mills, with Jordan Dawson, Ali, and Jake Lloyd across the half-back line. Ollie Florent, Josh Kennedy, and James Rowbottom along the centre, with Callum Sinclair, Luke Parker, and George Hewitt through the rucks. Forward line of Isaac Heaney, Lance Franklin, and Tom Papley, with Will Hayward, Nick Blakey, and Tom McCarson, leaving Harry Cunningham, Sam Gray, Lewis Taylor, and Sam Reid on the pine.
All right, the first thing I'm thinking when I see this team, I guess you've probably left Dylan Stevens out of the side after there's a lot of hype of him coming straight in. So you've got Sam Gray and Lewis Taylor there on the bench. I thought those were probably the two contentious ones that could probably go out. What do you think?
Fair call. I am all in on Dylan Stevens this year. I think all the hype is coming out of Sydney, so more than happy to take that feedback there. But I think, potentially just round one, if they do start Will Gould in that back pocket, that they might just go a little bit safe over blooding the two youngsters. But, it wouldn't surprise me either. I reckon he's really around the mark.
Oh, he's every chance with all the retirees they've had on in the off-season as well. A lot of them defenders anyway, so I reckon he comes straight in. I think you're right there.
Anyone else you don't like there?
No, I think apart from that, it's okay. Haven't really had too good a look at it, but no, it looks pretty good at first glance. But yeah, all right, we can move on, I reckon. So let's talk about your first player, Kays.
Right, yeah, mate. We'll start off with James Rowbottom. So my new boy gets the addition of forward status in 2020, which makes him a very tasty proposition. Now, previously, if you only kept the mid-only status this year, there's always guys like him who become risky keeper chances. But the fantasy gods have granted us him DPP with centre forward. So basically takes him from one of those risky choices to a must-have, in my opinion. So Rowbottom played 12 games in his debut season for a 63 average. In that, he had 4 games of 77 plus, which is a good little turnout for a first-year player. And considering he only played 67% time on ground, they are some very good numbers. When he went back and played the NEAFL, his NEAFL numbers were ridiculous. He played 8 games, averaged 119 points, averaging 17 kicks, 13 handballs, 4 marks, and 7 tackles. So in the NEAFL, never had a game under 105 points and had a PB of 142 points. Now, talking about what we just spoke before with the Swans kind of rejuvenating their list. So you've got no Zach Jones, no Kieran Jack, no McVeigh back there. So they're going to have to blood a few youngsters. Yes, they've got Taylor and Gray in there in the mix coming in from other teams, but I reckon that opens up spots for your Stevens, your Goulds, but then it also means that someone like Rowbottom just holds that spot throughout the year. So I think he's going to play basically all games in 2020. There's a good size about him. He tackles really well, averaging 5 tackles per game in the AFL, which was whooping numbers for a first-year player. So he's a real get on board for me this year as a DPP. I reckon he's someone you need to have in 2020.
Yeah, I don't mind the look of him. Could he actually be this year's Jordan Dawson case?
Better.
Those, well, I just mean those NEAFL numbers. That's why we liked Jordan Dawson last year, and he comes straight in and could do the similar type damage.
Yeah, well, obviously the NEAFL numbers are fantastic. You know, he's averaging 30 touches as an 18, 19-year-old kid, which is a massive tick even in the NEAFL. But the fact that he came in and played 12 AFL games and didn't look out of touch and, tackled well and really the thing for me is that time on ground percentage, 67% averaging 63, you add on another 10% there and, his numbers raise up to a low mid-70s easy.
Definitely monitor the time on ground stuff because if that does increase, then there's a chance he boosts it. Some players just are low time on ground players. Like you see players like Ollie Wines who are 6-7 years in and still only play about those sort of numbers. So you got to be wary of that. I don't know enough about his fitness type or what he's like with his running and stuff like that with his tanks to actually comment on that. But just something to monitor, I think, going in.
Well, I'm chips in this year.
I know you are.
Yes.
Is he? I reckon he's going to be a captain in our league though. So
he's definitely going to be kept. So I've almost given up there. But if
how many trade offers have you thrown the owners way?
Haven't thrown any, mate.
Oh, really?
No.
I might try to get on in the action just so I can have some leverage over you.
Bugger off.
All right, we'll talk about my next player, Sam Gray. So I think he may have been recruited in case Papley was on the move to kind of slot into that kind of forward role, pinch hit midfield type thing. But with Papley staying, I'm not sure if he's actually best 22, but he's worth having a look at. So if he does play, he could be handy up forward. He averaged 75 last season and had 8 scores over 80 and 3 above 100. So, some of the players we talk about through this don't score anything anywhere near that. So then we talk about potential, but this guy could actually come in and fill a hole for you. He came from games, those big scores came from games where he was running through the midfield. Had a lot of lower scores as well, and those were the games he was stuck up forward. So there's a bit of risk in there where he plays. Sydney are a bit weaker in the midfield at the moment, just with a few retirees, I think. So he's an outside chance. It's a midfield time. My suspicion is they'll blood younger players in there, but there is a chance that he could just pinch hit in there as well. Just looking at his history. So previously he has averaged 87 before, and that was in 2016 when he played as a midfielder, and 82 in 2017 as well. So midfielder mainly in those seasons as well. But yeah, pinching it up forward kind of plays the roles between the two. So pardon me. If he can produce these numbers again, I reckon he's going to be a real handy forward. And, the new club always opens up new possibilities. So what do you think, Case?
Yeah, I'm quite keen on him. Sam Gray is always one of those ones who, never really was anyone high on anyone's radar, I don't think, but always played a role for your fantasy team in, week out. And look, as you said, I still think there's a lot of blokes in that Sydney midfield who can run through that midfield. Like we always talk about Mills and Dawson and, Heaney and Papley can even go through there. So I think he kind of fits that mix quite nicely. And for me, if I was Horse, I'd almost be playing Gray over Lewis Taylor if it was between the two, because yes, Taylor probably has actually I wouldn't say he's actually got bit more goal now. So I just think Gray's a bit more polished player all round. So someone who can kind of play through the midfield and the forward, whereas I think Taylor himself is just a genuine forward pocket, forward flanker.
Where Taylor wins is whether he's having a shot from outside 25 metres, because I'm not sure if Sam Gray can make that distance. So that's probably the one up he's got there.
But he can just pop it up for big Nick Blakey to just come and go bang.
That's what he needs, if he makes 15.
But he's obviously not going to be kept, I don't think, in many leagues. But I reckon you could get him mid-draft and be pretty happy with that for a forward option.
We have a mid-season draft, and he's always the type that's available. And I picked him up last year, and he's good for an 80 here and there that kind of really pumps up your team. So if he's playing, definitely take a look at him.
Definitely.
All right, who's your next player?
My next player is, speak of the man, Nick Blakey. So, as the official president of the Young Key Forwards fan club, I have to talk about Nick Blakey. So, this kid played 21 games in his first season of footy, which is completely ridiculous for an 18, 19-year-old. And what's more ridiculous is that he only went goalless on 5 occasions. So, for a young bloke, he's still quite a bit, still quite lightly framed. But he just has there's something about him. I just actually really love watching him. So, did only average the 49, but there's something about him that just screamed future fantasy gun to me. So, he did have 2 scores in the 80s, and he did show that those scores weren't necessarily goal reliant because he only actually kicked 1 goal in each of those matches. So, shows he can get the touches, can tackle, take some grabs, etc. But he did also have 11 games of the 21 where he did have double-figure touches. So for a big guy, and we know that key forwards don't always get their hands on the ball that much, I think that if he can be, notching up regular double-figure touch games, some good tackle numbers, and, as we know, at least a goal a game, that's just really, really good signs going forward. So I suppose the question is, will 2020 be his big year? I'm not sure whether his fantasy numbers are going to go massive from 49 up to, 75 or something this year, but I reckon he can kind of push into that mid to high 70s, but then come 2021, the third year breakout, probably Buddy's moved on a bit more, playing less games. I think I'm going to be all over him like a fat kid on a cupcake in 2021, but definitely a stash for this year, and there is something about Nick Blakey that I like.
Well, we all know my opinions on key forwards. He is the athletic type that does have the big tank that can move at the ground. My main concern with key forwards is not just I just don't have. It's not like a blanket reason why I don't like them. I just think there's no coincidence in someone to say like Nick Riewoldt that there hasn't been a good fantasy key forward, and I just think the game's changed too much for them to actually score. So for someone who goes and watches every second week at the ground, you'll notice that when the ball's this is something you might not see if you're not watching every week. That when the ball's up the field, all the defenders are pushing back, and that's no secret. But it's so hard for actual key forward to create or make a lead these days, any kind of space, and you don't really see it until the ball's kicked on TV when it's happening. But there's absolutely no room for them to actually move into these days. And players like Nick Riewoldt and Matthew Pavlich and stuff and even like Warren Treadray back in the day, those types, they'd lead all the way up to basically the half back line and take grab. There's no way they can do that anymore. So they're relying on the ball to be kicked on top of their heads, pluck a mark, and then kick a goal. I just don't see key forwards scoring like they used to anymore.
But for me, I feel that Norton, those kind of players, even potentially throw Blakey in that mix, that they're basically tall midfielders now because they need to run so much and they've got the height and they can take grabs. So they're actually good all around the ground. Yes, their key objective in a game is to kick goals.
I just think it just screws them. Like they just are absolutely exhausted by the time they have to go back and take marks and kick goals and make leads. It just doesn't work out anymore. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I disagree, but I think that not all key forwards are great fantasy prospects. I'm not going to go. You got to have Jack Riewoldt. You got to have Tom Hawkins.
Well, do you think it's just a coincidence that we haven't had a good fantasy key forward in the last since say Riewoldt replied?
So Buddy's not a good key forward.
Buddy,
yeah,
he hasn't been a good key forward in the last 4 years. Yeah, as a fantasy key forward.
He's getting old.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. You're saying that the young ones coming through.
I'm talking about this next crop is going to be. Yeah. There's going to be Nick Riewoldt in them. I'm talking Norton, Kerno, these kind of guys. They're going to be absolute jets.
I just think we would have seen one established since kind of like the last kind of crop that were good. I think that's the reason why we haven't seen one actually develop. It's not because there hasn't been a good one. There's guys with a similar type potential. They're just not allowed to play the same game as they used to.
Well, 2020 will be the year.
I hope you're right, because nothing's better than watching a key forward score 150 fantasy points, but I just don't see it happening very often anymore.
Agree to disagree.
All right. Next player I'm going to talk about is Colin O'Riordan. So he only averaged 55 last year, and production went backwards from the previous year where he averaged 65. So a lot of people thought he was on the up. But he was a regular for a large chunk of last year. I think he played about 9 games in a row in the middle of the season where he was in Sydney's best 22. So why on earth is he playing each week when he's only scoring 55 and things like that? Well, he's actually a great intercept defender and he's always involved in a lot of Sydney scoring. So that's why Horse liked to play him, I think. So looking at his NEFL numbers, this guy was absolutely immense. He played 5 games for an average of 119 fantasy points, that is, averaging 33 disposals per game. So he played the same role in the NEFL just off the halfback. So a lot of these guys you'll see go into the midfield and just dominate playing NEFL. He specifically played the exact same role in the NEFL because that's the role they want him to play in the AFL. So in the NEFL, he was the best intercept player in the competition. I don't know if that's a hard thing to do or not, but it seems like John Longmire wants him to play. So he just needs to replicate his NEFL scoring at AFL level. Now, that's easier said than done, but we always like these kind of guys who go huge in the NEFL because there's a chance that, even if they score 20, 30 points less in the AFL, they're going to be handy fantasy scorers. So he looks like a fantasy player to me. Now he just needs to score like one.
So where's he going to fit into that back line?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, I guess what if someone like Will Gould doesn't work out, or Jordan Dawson could go into the midfield? So that's another thing as well. And actually, that's something we should have brought up in your best 22. That how those two are going to really impact each other's scoring on those halfback flanks. I think if they both play there. So with that's Jordan Dawson and Jake Lloyd, both on the halfback flanks. But anyway, so that could actually come to fruition if I guess Horse wanted to start using Jordan Dawson in the midfield again, which I personally think is his best position. Not just because I own him and I want him to score bulk points,
bias.
I think he should be playing midfield anyway because he can just do everything. But anyway, what do you think about O'Riordan?
Fantasy numbers are great. I just worry
in the
that
NEFL, you mean?
In the NEFL, yes. But I just worry about holding a position in that Sydney backline if they're full strength. Like they've got a few handy kids and they've recruited. Not too bad. I know they're not defenders, but I think they've got enough talent to roll through that backline without necessarily relying on him. But one of those ones that is definitely a monitor, definitely worth a late pick for me, but not someone I can see slotting into that defence too comfortably.
Yeah, look, he's a very late speculative pick.
Hey, we're the Keeper League pod, man. We talk about these guys.
Exactly. Kays, tell us something about Oliver Florent.
Yes. Now, Mr. Florent had a very hot end to the 2020 season and has had some serious pre-season hype about him too coming out of Sydney. So, in his third year, Florent averaged just a moderate 69 points from 21 games, which was slightly up from his 63 points from 22 games the year prior. Now, owners probably would have expected a bit more from Ollie going forward in 2019, but they would be licking their lips the way he finished off the year. So, he did only notch up the 1 ton for the season, which was 113 point PB against Port, but Florent did also have 4 scores in the 90s, including 2 99s, so just missed that magical ton by 1 point on 2 occasions. So Florent missed round 19, but then finished off the year with an 89.5 average from his last 4 games, showing he really has that ability to pick up some good numbers. Now, with some natural progression, I think he'll add a few more touches and tackles to his numbers each week, especially as you see the slowing down of Josh Kennedy. And he's just going to be one of the Sydney Swans midfield leaders of the future. And if you believe the reports coming out the Harbour City, then 2020 is Florent season.
Yeah, I like the look of him at the end of last year. I think as well, like as you mentioned, with a few of the older boys retiring, I know they didn't actually play a lot last year, those older blokes like Kieran Jack and stuff, who would usually take up a little bit of midfield time off of him. And then I guess Dan Hanbury left the year before and it didn't really affect his numbers. But I think, the key is Kennedy as they get on. Horse looked like he wanted to kind of give someone else the mantle in their midfield, I guess apart from Luke Parker as well. So it looked like at the end of last year he was just given more responsibility and, they wanted to get the ball in his hands more, so hopefully that equates to some more fantasy scoring from Florent.
Yeah, he's a good size. There's something about him that, I think it's just that tall mid hybrid that just looks good.
He looks like a child still.
Yeah,
after 3 years. Yeah.
But have you seen the pictures of his pre-season?
No, I haven't actually.
He's like ripped.
Oh, aren't they all these days?
Mini Nat Fife.
Whoa, they're all mini Nat Fife these days.
Everyone's mini Nat Fife.
All right, we'll move on to my last player, and that's Lewis Squizzy Taylor. So he was out of the side at Brisbane after round 12 last year and only averaged 70 last season. Obviously, he was traded to Sydney as a result, but halfway through last year, he went back to the NEFL and I guess reinvented himself as a bit of a winger. So he always played that high half forward role, a bit of a connector role at Brisbane. But he started playing in the midfield a bit more on a wing. So he averaged 108.6 from 12 games in the NEFL last year, and he never averaged more than 77 in the AFL, but he was always handy forward cover. So this year, he looks like he might be playing on a wing if he gets a game at Sydney. So the only issue is he's mid only now, so he loses a fair bit of value without that forward status. Normally I'd write this guy off straight away, just knowing his past and now knowing he is mid only and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But I guess just the new club always piques my interest. You never know when a guy like this is going to bounce back moving to another club. So I reckon just monitor him in the Marsh series to see how he goes, because there could be a little bit of something there.
As a mid only, I just can't go near him. If he gets back into the AFL and plays every game and he's averaging 77, you can't really carry 77 mid only.
The only way I pick him up is if we watch the Marsh 2 games he plays and he's absolutely dominating. He looks like he's going to be in the side round 1. I pick him up really late just as like cover. And that's it.
Because he will get him late, because I don't think there's going to be too many people going for him as a mid only. You know, if he had the DPP or even the forward status, he'd probably rise up some more ranks, but as a mid only, it's bloody tough to find.
Even if he tears it up, he's still a late pick for me. Like, I just wouldn't trust him.
Interesting about the NEFL numbers, they're still, I know we always joke about the NEFL being pretty average, but 108 is not too bad for a wingman, really. Nah. So, but how it's going to translate
take 30 off and that's your AFL score. So,
and which is what it is, 70, 78. So, but yeah, he'd have to be an M6 or something like that, or bench cover each week. But it's just not. It's just not really worth the punt, I don't think.
No, probably not, unless he's playing each week. Anyway, we'll move on to the West Coast Eagles.
Just the new song?
Nah. I want to cut straight in here. And that there is the theme song of the West Coast Eagles.
The old one.
The old one, not the new one with Birds of Tokyo, and not like the re-recorded version that we're going to hear from Bad Dreams doing Port Adelaide's very soon. Not like that one. But what's with that West Coast song, though? When they wrote that, did they actually think that, oh, shit, a group of footballers are going to have to sit around in a circle after a game and actually sing, "We're flying high" for like 5 minutes before it actually gets into the song? Did they actually think about that?
No, obviously.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible song.
Basically, any theme song written after or from the new clubs that have come into the VFL, I suppose,
except for
crap.
the big sound.
It's an okay song.
That's the best out of that's one of the best in the league, but it's top 5.
It's top 5. It'll be top 5.
So that's one of the later ones, but I think they actually realised that clubs actually have to sing this after they win and stuff.
It was crafted by a bloody good musician.
Yeah, so that's sure. Actually put someone good in charge.
Makes sense.
All right, let's read your best 22 for West Coast.
Rightio. From the back line, Brad Shepherd, Tom Barras and Jackson Nelson. Half-back line of Shannon Hearn, Jeremy McGovern and Lewis Jetta, with Elliot Yao, Jack Redden and Andrew Gaff through the midfield. Nick Naitanui, Luke Shuey and Tim Kelly in the guts, with Jamie Cripps, Jack Darling, Dom Sheed in the half-forward line. Oscar Allen, Josh Kennedy and Liam Ryan up forward, with Nathan Vardy, Jack Petrocelli, Will Schofield and Liam Duggan on the bench.
I've noticed that you've left out my boy Jake Waterman. What's the go there? He didn't even make your emergencies, but he played finals and stuff last year.
Yeah, look.
What's the go?
Tim Kelly's in, Waterman out.
Yeah, I guess, but Tip's should have a different role. But that said, if I look at the forward line, I don't know who I leave out of that side, because that pushes Dom Sheed, I guess, into a half-forward flank. Maybe I'd take Jack Petrocelli out or something like that, who's a bit more of an impact player. But I don't know. Someone I think, this is not going with the best 22, but someone I think is actually a little bit underrated this season, and I haven't talked about him here, is Jamie Cripps. So if you look, actually no, I have talked about him this, so we'll talk about that later. Sorry, I did remember that I wrote up on him, so I won't give that away.
My thing with West Coast is potentially because we don't get a heap of Perth media here in Adelaide, but I really don't know much about anyone that's not best 22 at West Coast.
Yeah.
Even the guys like Petrocelli or
I feel like they don't rotate through a lot of their squad. It's just the same guys coming in and out.
But I feel it's like West Coast is just an old set squad.
Yeah.
And then there's just a few guys who come in for a few games. You never really get a good glimpse of them, especially in the AFL.
Well, I think they're a big chance this year, especially with Tim Kelly in, and if Nick Naitanui can stay fit, they're going to go very close, I think.
I think Nick Naitanui is almost the key because, having someone like Vardy or Hickey in that side doesn't really give you the best thing at the middle. And you've really got one of the best midfields in the comp with, Gaff, Yo, Shuey and Kelly now. So
just that midfield is amazing, isn't it? Just looking at it on paper. Those 6 players there in the middle of that field are just yeah, top shelf.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to looking at some players. Who you got first?
Rightio. So first up is Liam Duggan. Now, he's a guy who's always promised but never quite delivered. So, especially in our league, Duggan's been a player on many fantasy coaches' lips but just hasn't risen to the occasion. So, on the last 3 seasons, he's averaged bang on 67 points. But at 23, you almost feel there's a bit more to come to his game and ability, but it just seems whenever you think he's going to take that step, he lets you down. So 8 out of 15 and 9 out of 21 games in his last 2 years, he's scored 70 plus, but just doesn't take that game to the next level with big scores. And for a defender, that kind of lets you down because he has a few too many 40s. So yes, those plus 70s are great, but it's just those 40s and 30s and 50s that really gets Liam Duggan coaches down. So saying all of that, looking at the squad, so Hearn is 32 and Shepherd's 28 now. Obviously, that's not too old, but pushing towards the latter part of his career. I just feel that there might be a slight chance that someone like Duggan can get a bit more of a fantasy-friendly role, especially with potentially Hearn coming into his last season of footy. For me, he has the tools to be a consistent defender. It's just whether he can do something with them in 2020 and start to be the fantasy scorer he probably should be. So, interested to see what the role will be this year. One to take late in drafts, I feel. But, with West Coast, there's just the same old, keep delivering for their side. So, it's hard to see where Duggan might take that next step up in 2020.
I think it's the same old from Duggan every year as well. Like we keep talking about each year, he could be the next fantasy goer in West Coast side, but it just never comes to fruition. So he's kind of one of those players that I've written off by now, and I wouldn't be taking too much of a look at. But look, like you said, if Hearn does go down, say if he gets injured and goes out, I think Shepherd kind of is their main ball user out of defence. So more so, like we saw him take over that from Hearn at the end of last year anyway, because Hearn's numbers were on the decline towards the end of the season anyway. I don't know, Duggan, look, late. Like I'm all about best 22 players this year because I need some on my side.
And he's the best 22 player.
He's the best 22 player. So he's something I'd probably look at picking up, but that's my circumstances. It just depends on the circumstances of your team.
Fair call. Who you got, mate?
All right, I'll talk about Jake Waterman after I had a bit of a sook that you were
unlucky to not be the best 26.
Yeah, not even in your emergencies. What's going on there? Anyway,
controversial. I'm the Kane Corns of fantasy.
Oh, geez, you're a little bit better bloke than Kane Corns, but anyway. Split between AFL and Waffle last season was Jake Waterman. His AFL average was 61. However, he did average 72 from his last 3 games. So he's listed as a key forward in the prospectus, but he doesn't really play like one, especially with Kennedy and Darling in the side, and then Oscar Allen sitting in that pocket too. He gets forced up the ground a lot more. So if we look at his game against Richmond last year, they played him on a wing, and he actually reminded me a lot of the Crows' Tom Lynch when he plays at his best, when Waterman plays at his best. He kind of reminds me of the Crows' Tom Lynch, just the way he was kind of connected to the forward lines, pushing up to the wing and that next delivery inside 50. So if we look at his Waffle numbers, he averaged 92 in the Waffle, which is big for Waffle really, because there's not a lot of 100 plus scorers in there. So look, he's in between the first team and the second team at the moment with the reserves. If he cements a spot, I think he'll be a handy late pickup going forward because he does have a few tricks in the bag that he can use, and he has shown he can be a handy fantasy scorer, pump out the odd 80, 90 here and there as well. So, I don't know, Kaz, do you have much of an opinion on Jake Waterman?
Not a massive opinion. Look, 191 centimetres isn't ridiculously tall for a key kind of a forward or that mid-hybrid kind of forward. It's just, when they're full strength, and, we didn't really see the best of Josh Kelly last year in the West Coast side. I think, Darling, Kennedy, and Oscar Allen are probably the 3 key forwards in there, and then they've got the smaller guys rotating through. And as we said, because they've got so many good midfielders that they have to kind of rotate some of these guys through the half-forward flank. I'm talking especially your Sheeds and Kelly. So it's just, I just kind of find it hard to see where he just fits into that side. Yeah. That's my only problem with someone like Waterman.
Tim Kelly, pushes him out a little bit for mine, but like some of your bench players, I think he could come on for as well. So I reckon he's a chance. He will play next season. So the thing is whether I can see him becoming a really good fantasy scorer, probably not.
It's just, I honestly can't get that excited about West Coast from our side of view, our point of view from a fantasy keeper league. Like, we want. You've got your top kind of 6 to 10 players at West Coast who are guns, and then it's just like real scraps in between there. So it's a team I couldn't get too excited about when doing the preview.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's move on to your next player.
Josh Kennedy. So I'm looking for a big bounce back from 2020 from the former Coleman medalist. So Kennedy hasn't done a pre-season in 3 years, but he's just finishing up his first full one heading into 2020. So in 2016 and 2017, when he was an absolute gun of the competition, he averaged 88 and 82. And then the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019, only averaged the miserly 65 and 54. As well, his game time's been down 10% over those last 2 years. So obviously fitness, no pre-season's been a massive effect on his scoring and football ability the last 2 seasons. What I like about this is everyone's going to be writing off JK on draft night. They're going to say, too old, he's past it. But I think you're just going to get an absolute gun for pocket change going forward. So obviously he's probably more one for the team who's hunting a flag and not worried about age. But I've banged on a lot about this pre-season. One, you want best 22 players, and one, you want guys who have done full pre-seasons and are fit flying into 2020. Kennedy ticks 2 of those boxes, and I think for a very late pickup in most keeper league drafts, you're going to get a steal with Josh Kennedy this year.
Yeah, I reckon he's pretty undervalued this year as well. If you look at him in Fantasy Classic, he's actually probably a half decent pickup. I think he's priced like $450K. So yeah, he might be my handy one there, but we don't really talk about that format here. But yeah, look, I like the look of him in like he's going to be one of my targets for like my bench spots as well, because if you can get a guy like him coming off your bench, it's pretty damn handy, especially with the scarcity of forwards this year. If you're in the hunt for a flag, he's probably one you want to be looking at late to kind of just fill out the list, I think.
Because people are going to look at his last year average, which was 54.
Yeah.
You're just going to think he's over the hill, and he's not. He's done a full preseason. He's ready to go. He's ready to kick bags and could get back up to that 80 average, no worries.
Yeah, if West Coast are dominating as well, he could definitely have those big bags at 10 and stuff that he loves kicking.
For sure.
All right, we'll talk about my next player, and this is the guy I said was underrated before, and that's Jamie Cripps. So Cripps had a bad run with injuries last season, so he only averaged 64 in 2019. Now, Cripps only had 100-plus score, and that happened in finals, so it doesn't actually count towards his season scores, but it doesn't really bump his averages up that much because he's still pretty out of shit, yeah. Look, he had 8 scores above 80 from 19 games, and that's if you do include finals, but he had lots of low scores that kind of dented the average, some 20s, some 30s and stuff like that. Not always injury affected as well. He was just kind of playing low time on ground and that sort of stuff, coming back from injury, things like that. But look, if you look at his averages prior to 2019, so here we go. In 2018, which coincidentally was the Big Hoofers premiership year,
no one cares.
And he was a premiership player.
No one cares.
He averaged 81 that year, and I think he actually had 114 or something like that in the grand final, which was nice. But then looking at 2017, 71, 2016, he averaged 71 as well. 2015, he averaged 81, so he loves the ones, okay? So basically, if he can get back to what he was the last, 4 or 5 years, he's definitely a handy kind of one of your last forward spots / bench cover, I find. He's not super old. I think he's about 26. 28, is he? Okay, that's a little bit older than I thought. But look, if he's fully fit, I think he should at least be a 75 average minimum. So I reckon that's pretty handy. Yeah, again, considering the scarcity of forwards, you can get a 75 average forward into your team late. I think that's going to be handy to fill up your team.
Yeah, I think if you're hunting for a flag and hunting for consistent players who are going to play each week, Cripps is the one. He's just one of those guys, especially for me, who is never really hunting a flag that hard because my team's crap. But are we the wrong people to be giving this podcast? No, definitely not. I love finding diamonds in the rough.
I flagged up before, so I've got some credentials.
But Jamie Cripps is just one of those guys that people just easily overlook. Just be like, nah, small forward, not too interested. But when you actually delve deeper into the numbers, he's very, very handy, especially if you are just chasing that F3, F4, F5 in your team this year.
Oh, just F3, F4, F5, just somewhere between that lower.
I think so.
Okay, no,
if you're talking 71.
No, I'm just saying that's a big hole. F3, F4, F5.
Well, you said that if forwards are that scarce this year, he could easily be F3 by the end of the year.
Narrow it down to one of those spots. You take him to your F3, your F4, or your F5.
F4.
Okay, there we go. That's better. Shoot for the middle.
Hey, I like to be very vague, then I can't ever be in trouble.
Exactly. You can't be wrong if you just say every possibility.
Correct. Yeah.
Good. All right.
They won't be F1. I can guarantee you that.
I can guarantee that too.
F2, unless your team stinks.
Let's move on to Hamish Brayshaw, which you've got.
I do. So Mr. Brayshaw is really only getting a mention in here because his last name is Brayshaw, and I think we're obliged to talk about every Brayshaw in the league.
Do you reckon his parents love him as much as the other two?
Maybe they like him more.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe he's a bit more the normal one.
He's the younger one, isn't he? So everyone loves the younger kid.
He's the shittest one at football.
Well, you don't know that. He just has an opportunity.
Okay, we'll wait and see. Go on.
His waffle numbers were exceptional. So he had 8 tons from 16 games, which is very, very good going because you don't actually see that many big scores in the waffle. So had a PB of 127 points and averaged a tick under 100 last season. And his only poor score of the year was an injury-affected 55.
They're good numbers for the waffle.
They are 99.8 average, which, is probably top 10 easily in the waffle. So he averaged 15 kicks, 8 handballs and 7 tackles. So another good tackler in the family. The thing is, we did see him get delisted and then re-recruited over the off-season, which we've talked about earlier. That's probably not as big a worry now as it once was, just because clubs play, a bit of funny buggers with their salary caps, etc. But on stats, I think he's almost got to come into your calculations, especially if he gets a run in the Marsh series this year. Now, obviously the West Coast midfield runs so deep, but, there's always a chance, just get that one game he could deliver a couple injuries in the West Coast side. He's got the fantasy pedigree, one to monitor coming up this week in the Marsh series, but probably one to monitor more so if you're playing the waiver wire. Just keep a look out for his waffle scores on our website. We'll have them up each week. But it could be a nice little streamer if he does get a run in the West Coast midfield.
I will not be surprised if he is still in the pool after our draft this year. I just cannot see him with that West Coast midfield. And I think he sometimes is just picked because he's a Brayshaw. And I would not be surprised if he doesn't have an AFL club at the end of this year without playing a game this season.
Boom.
Yeah, whack. Sorry, mate. Sorry, Hamish Brayshaw.
Sorry, Hamish.
Yeah, I don't mean to be mean.
Hates you, but I actually like you.
It's just a fact of life. Some people make it, some people don't.
He might get it. He might get picked up by another club.
Who knows, guys? Who knows?
I don't.
All right, let's move on to my last player, and that is the big man, Nick Naitanui. So he is going to be super hungry this year. I guess missing out on the flag a couple of years ago and then bombing out of finals the way they did last year. He's ready to go. Especially if you watched him in the finals too. He looked like a man possessed. But basically 3 injury interrupted years, finally gets a full preseason into him and he looks ready to go. He averaged 72 last season from 3 regular season games, added in his final scores, and he gets his average up to 78 for the year. Nick Naitanui had an 80 plus average from 2015 to 2018, but let's point out that he didn't actually play at all in 2017, so I don't know if you can count them the same numbers. Do you average in the 0? I don't know.
No.
Anyway, look, he's going to be a low time on ground player probably for the rest of his career. The good thing about Nick Naitanui is that his points per minute numbers are generally through the roof. So he'll ruck the whole time he's on the ground. He won't rest up forward, all that sort of stuff. He'll win taps, he'll tackle, take marks, get touches, all that sort of stuff. Should still go around the 80 mark with the low time on ground because of the points per minute scoring. Mm-hmm. The issue is the durability. He is very injury prone after doing 2 knees, and I think it was an ankle last year. It doesn't look like he's going to stay on the park for long periods of time. That said, he's done the full preseason. He looks ready to go, and when rucks are pretty scarce these days, he could be a handy pickup. What do you think, Case?
I don't want to touch him at all.
You don't think he's going to be kept in our league? I know that for a fact.
Well, I'm an ex-Nick Nat owner.
Yep. So am I, actually.
Yeah.
Has been around. As of last week.
Look, especially if you're starting a new keeper league this year, don't go anywhere near him because it's just the West Coast ruck situation after Nick Nat is bad. Nick Nat himself is an impact player ruckman. He's an absolute jet of the competition. Love watching him play footy, but as he said, he doesn't really play that much time on ground. He's a very much in-out, off the ground, do his job, get off. His game has obviously changed a lot because he just can't be out there for as long as he wants to be because he's had the injury issues. So, I don't know, I suppose potentially, but if you take him, you've actually then got to take Nathan Vardy and Tom Hickey.
Yeah, you've got to have
you've got to have 3 ruckmen on your
yeah.
spots, which is just a waste because there's a fair chance Nick Nat will miss 4 or 5 games next year, and then you've got to try and slot in a Hickey and a Vardy in there, and it just gets messy.
If he's fit for the whole season, let's say hypothetically, he's fit for the whole season,
yep.
Does Nick, and you're playing a 12-team league like us,
yep.
Does Nick Naitanui become a top 12 ruckman in the competition if he plays every game this season?
He could be, but if you were drafting a new league, I would tell every coach not to draft him.
Yeah, but there's that
from the start of the season.
Yep.
I would, if you were a 12-team league, I would not be having Nick.
It's more so that in our leagues where you have teams that have like 4 good ruckmen sitting on their list, you've got to take someone.
Yep.
Nick Naitanui is actually a viable option for those people that don't have a ruck option this season, and he's available, I think.
Yeah, It's just the durability is a massive concern.
That's what I mean. So you've got to, like you said,
yeah, but he's only ever going to be like an 80 average.
Yeah, but
which is fine for you, like a utility.
All I'm saying
spot,
is some people are going to be forced into taking him, I think, because they're going to need a ruckman.
Yeah.
But like you said, you're going to have to take those handcuffs. They're going to be vital to your team this season.
Which clogs up your list because you've actually gone from, we have 32 on our list.
Yeah.
So you've only
Down
got
to
29.
30.
You've got 29 players when you take it. So it's just, for me, it's a waste.
Yeah. All right. Just, like I said, some people are going to have to do it. But we'll move on and we'll start looking at the Western Bulldogs.
Sons of the West.
Now, Kays, that's a song you could sing along to if you just won a game of football.
Yes.
I find.
It is.
It's not like we're flying high for 5 minutes.
So Tigerland's up there. Geelong one's up there. Essendon one's up there. I know.
Big sounds up there.
Big sounds up there. It is.
I don't know.
Sydney's pretty good.
Yeah, Sydney, well, that's the old Port Adelaide song, the black and the white, the red and the white. So, I don't mind Sydney.
I don't mind Songs of the West.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, you can actually sing along to that one, so it's good. Anyways, let's actually read out the best 22 and stop talking shit about the songs.
Yes, rightio. Taylor Duray, Alex Keith and Hayden Crozier in the back line with Jason Johannesson, Easton Wood and Caleb Daniel. Midfield, Bailey Smith, Marcus Bontempelli and Lockie Hunter with Tim English, Josh Dunkley and Jack McRae in the ruck. Forward line of Paddy Lipinski, Aaron Norton and Bailey Dale with Josh Shackey, Josh Bruce and Sam Lloyd up forward, leaving Mitch Wallace, Toby McLean, Tom Liberatore and Matt Suckling on the bench.
Yeah, the Bulldogs look pretty settled after last year. It was good to see them actually return to playing some decent football. Just looking across it, I can't. Oh, Alex Keith is actually a nice inclusion.
Big inclusion.
There, actually, for them. Who does that replace at fullback? Who was it?
Probably like Jack Trengove.
Yeah, that's right. Jackson Trengove. That's right. So he's out the side. Yeah, so that's a good in for them there. Look, I think that's a pretty settled side. I would like to see how Toby McLean goes this year, but we've actually talked about him later on. Matt Suckling seems like he's just going to go forever. So I don't know.
Just keeps going. Yeah.
I just can't think who else comes in for him though. That's all when looking at that side. Maybe I should have done a bit more research before looking at that one. But look, I think that's a pretty settled side there for the Western Bulldogs, and I think you've gone close there. We'll wait to see what our listeners see when we put it out. I reckon that might be tomorrow.
Yes.
They'll probably pick a few more holes in it than I will.
No holes at all.
All right, talk about your first player.
It is Aaron Norton. So this boy is going to be a star and he's entering his magical third year, which we know means breakout. So Norton has one of the best sets of hands in the AFL and did not miss a game of footy in his second season last year. Now, while he only averaged 64 last year, Norton was building something very nicely towards the back end of the year where he averaged 77 points from his last 5 games. Now, he had a 125-point PB against Richmond where he kicked 5 goals, and he also had 3 games last year where he took 10 marks plus. So, his biggest scores have been a touch reliant on his goals kicked, but that's been a bit of a twofold issue for me. So, 1, he's had to play closer to the goals as the Bulldogs' number 1 forward. But now that there are some list changes with the additions to the Dogs, I think it means that Norton can roam free and absolutely tear the competition apart. So Alex Keith has been added to their back line and Josh Bruce to their forward line. Now this means that Norton will basically become the best swingman in the comp and roam free wherever he pleases. So I honestly believe this guy can push high 70s, early 80s this year and will run amok in the AFL this year, a la a Justin Westhoff a couple years ago. What do you think, Hev?
Well, it's like same with like Richmond last year. You think, why is it different for when Aaron Norton and they bring in someone like Josh Bruce to Western Bulldogs? Mm-hmm. Why is it different for them and Norton's going to go big as opposed to neither of Jack Riewoldt or Tom Lynch going big last season?
They're both key forwards.
Yeah, well, so was these guys.
Josh Shackey's up there too, man.
Yeah.
They've got so many forward options now. They've got a settled spine, and that means Norton can just do what he wants.
I just keep thinking we're ignoring the facts here that key forwards just don't score points anymore.
I just think you're ignoring the facts that you just are blinded by some hatred of guys over 6 foot.
I think they're very good footballers, and I love watching him play. I love the way he can leap, take a mark, kick snags. I love all that stuff.
If I said,
I just don't think key forwards are going to score fantasy points anymore.
So as an Aaron Norton owner, which I am, so there may be a touch bias here, but if I said, mate, do you want Aaron Norton? Would you be like, no?
Yeah, well, if you want to get him for free, I'll probably take him because I know he'll play every week. But just looking at his numbers here on the internet, he's got 8 scores below 50 last season.
He's
something
a
like that.
second-year player, man.
I know, but still, like you talk about his huge game 125, he backs up with a 42, and that's because when they see a player actually stand out like that, they would just put 5 blokes in front of him next week.
Yeah, but
and
he's going to
do
be bigger,
anything.
stronger, tall. He's probably grown over the off-season. He's probably got another couple of centimetres
None
on
of
him.
the best key forwards in the game can actually break out and score fantasy points.
Aaron
I don't see him
Norton
doing
is
difference.
going to be a jet, man. Get
Anyways,
on board.
Look, he'll be a great player. I got no doubt. He'll be like Tom Lynch, like one of those type players where very good player.
Tommy Lynch
just won't
is an
score
actual
fantasy.
goal kicker.
Yeah.
Aaron Norton is a swing man.
Yeah, maybe. He's a bit more of a
Truth.
swingman, but I just don't see him being a good fantasy scorer. I don't see any of them being good fantasy scorers. No key forwards.
I'll fight you for that.
All right, well, let's do it later. I'm going to talk about Toby McLean for our first, for my first Bulldogs player of the night. So let's look at his history in scoring first. So 2016, he went at 73. Then 2017, he went at 85. So, he built a good, about 12 points, 13 points per game there. Then he went into 2018 where he kind of broke out and had 94.5, played all 22 games in that season. Gets to 2019, everyone's expecting this guy to be the next superstar, and he averages 68.2.
Yeah.
Look, 2018, he looked like he's going to be one of the next fantasy scorers. In that season, he went at 105 the first half of the season and had 9 100-plus scores in that season. So absolutely huge in 2018.
Yeah.
So why didn't he replicate it last year? Well, he had a bit of an injury to his AC joint at the end of 2018 and just was never the same after that. Then it looked like last year that a lot more of, Western Bulldogs players moved into the midfield ahead of him, and he kind of played a lot more up forward. So, look, he lost out on midfield time as well, just to Josh Dunkley and players like that. Just couldn't get in there, really. Averaged 68.2 last year. Real mixed bag of scoring. Only one score above 100, and that was in round 21 versus Essendon. And look, there's no guarantee to play midfield again, but if he does, I reckon he could be a real steal in drafts this season if he can manage to get back to, say, his 2018 form.
Disagree, because I think he's actually got still fantasy value or fantasy credibility around there. So I don't think he's just going to be forgotten about. I think as a McLean owner, you're not going to be delisting him after that year.
Oh, you'd hope not, but you never know. He could be available.
I don't think he will be.
Okay.
But for those leagues who only keep 8 or 10 or something like that,
Yeah,
he's
maybe.
definitely going to be around and that kind of thing. But where he would slide to in a draft, potentially a lot lower because of the low average last year. So you might be able to get a bargain. But
He's one of those players that if he's available in a pool, you would lose him because he's going to be down in the page 3 or 4 or 5 with the other guys that average 68.
yeah, well, you hope our listeners are much more astute than that. Yes.
But I'm just saying they sometimes get lost.
They do. I think he can bounce back. Potentially not to that 94 level, but I think he can easily be a
80
mid-80s,
forward. Yeah.
mid-80s forward. No dramas at all.
Yep. All right, let's move on.
Right, the next one is Josh Shackey. So not really part of my key forward club, but just on the outer. He still needs to give me a bit more to be fully embraced by myself. But I think he's building into a handy key forward and someone you should have in your plans going ahead. Now, while he's yet to set the world alight, he does look to have a few fantasy strings to his bow, and I think he's going to definitely benefit from the arrival of Josh Bruce. So Josh Bruce will play that deep forward, which will allow Shackey to get up the ground a bit more and use his athletic ability, play higher up the field and hopefully get a bit more ball. So he averaged 55 last year, but did come home a lot stronger, averaging 69 in his last 5 games. He started to hit the scoreboard a lot last year, which was fantastic, and boosted his scores. Now, he steps into his 5th season this year, and I think that Shackey can take his fantasy scoring to the next level. Now, the Dogs forward line will be one to watch this pre-season, and I think if they can keep their big 3 on the park, they look quite potent up there with Bruce, Shackey and Norton. So not one I'm getting super hyped up about like Aaron Norton, because I don't think he's quite that good, but I think that Shackey can be a pretty handy, let's say Tom Hawkins, Jack Rewalt style, mid-70s kind of average forward.
All right, guys, I really appreciate the analysis you've done on this one, but for the sake of just not repeating myself, I think we're just going to move on with the key forwards.
Well, fine. But, you keep going, forwards are so scarce this year, and then you're not listening to this absolute gold that I'm giving you.
What do you think? No, he's not going to average any more than 60, so there's no point.
I will happily take that bet.
Okay, well, I don't bet, but I know. I just don't want to talk about this anymore.
Well, you can't
no
just
more key
keep- you
forwards.
go, key forwards are shit.
I'm always right with key forwards. None of them stood out last year. Everyone we analysed, none of them turned into a fantasy gun.
Disagree.
Which one?
I don't know. Off the top of my head.
None of them did. It never happens. Key forwards don't score anymore.
2020 is the year of the key forward.
Unless you're Matt Taberner and he averaged 80 because he didn't get injured.
When bananas.
He got
See,
injured.
you just answered your own question. Key forwards are back. 2020,
They
man.
are not. Let's move on to my next player. See, this is a forward who he won't be available in many leagues,
Is he a
but
key
if he's in a
forward?
draft, he's going to be awesome. So
you're talking about someone who's not relevant to the pod.
well, no, because if you're starting a new keeper league, you want to know where to take this guy. So,
Okay.
Bailey Smith, he's one of the best junior scorers from the 2018 Super Draft. So, let's just remind everyone that this guy averaged 127 in the NAB League and 96 in the Under 18 Champs, where they have reduced numbers.
But it was from a very small sample size, which we made him a little bit risky.
Yeah, I was about to mention that, but thank
Okay.
you. Anyway, look,
But man, he showed the doubters wrong.
for the first few games, he was actually those first few games where he was like playing injured. He was actually a better scorer than Walsh. Look, he was injured for the final year of his juniors. He missed a lot of football and he played a few. He actually worked his way to get back up for the Under 18 Championships, which was a big effort. And he even playing half injured, he scored quite well at the Under 18 Champs as well. So he still went at pick 7 on the back of all this. So that kind of goes to show the class of this kid. So he had no preseason last year, like basically nothing. He was a shock round 1 debutant. They rushed him back to get a kid back into debut round 1. This is how much highly they rate him. So it was a very slow start to his season, playing very low time on ground and spent a lot of that time on ground up forward. So the time on ground numbers really didn't improve until really late in the season as well. So that'll explain the low average. But yeah, he really warmed up at the end. So he played a lot of midfield time, and Bailey Smith ended up averaging 69 for the season, which is a nice little average there. He went 85 from his last 5 games. So that's a bit of selective stats because if you include the final that he played, the average actually comes down to 78.4 because he didn't score that well in that first final. But if you last 5 games of the season,
finals leeway to a kid.
yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Especially when you're getting done like they did as well. All right, cool. So as a forward, these numbers should be gold in keeper league teams if he can maintain them going forward. So the issue is, I guess we might not see any midfield time for a while because that midfield is stacked. You know, you got Bont, Dunkley, McRae, all those guys way ahead of him. So he will rotate through with the likes of Mitch Wallace and those types. But look, he could be a handy forward for some time now. That's, I guess, the positive on it because it's unlikely that he will lose his forward status for a little bit because he'll still be rotating up there for a while. So I think he could, if he goes on the back he did at the end of last season and takes the next step, no reason why he can't be a high 70s, low 80s forward for the next couple of years. And I think he's going to be a pretty handy one in keeper leagues. So if you're drafting a brand new one, again, you're going to see him at that average of 69, but really he's probably should be picked at the average of about an 80 player. Anyway, so that's just why I thought I'd mention him, Case.
I am very keen on Bailey Smith. I think he's going to be a jet. As a forward, I think you're going to get a good year out of him, maybe another one after this one. But I think after that, he's actually just going to become a gun midfielder. So
Yeah,
it's
and
not
that's the
going to
thing
be
you
something to worry about.
It's the thing you got to plan ahead for in keeper leagues, I guess, is actually think about where they're going to be in the next 2 years. But I think once he matures to be that kind of level of player, he's going to be a fantasy gun anyway. So I think it's one of those safe ones you can pick up, I think, as a forward, knowing that he'll be a midfielder in the future.
Probably one that could hold Toby McLean out of a proper spot too.
Yeah, agree.
You know. Rightio, my last player. I'm going to talk about another key forward. Nah, joking. I'm talking about
God,
Hayden
I was about to walk
Crozier.
out.
So Hayden Crozier, he's a super underrated defender for mine, and I just want us to spread some love about Mr. Crozier. So always one of these guys who's never going to get lots of praise, but believe me, these are the guys that win you games. So he's only 26 and finally settled in the Dogs side. And I also think there's a bit of room for improvement from him. So 11 of his 21 games last year, he averaged 70 plus, with 116 being his best score last year. So he averaged a clean 72, which is what you want from that kind of D3 to D5 defender. And what I like about him is he just goes about getting his 15 to 20 touches a game, uses the ball well, takes some really nice intercept marks. But where I see that little bump coming from this year is the injury to Taylor Giray. So Giray is going to miss a heap of 2020 after having hip surgery in the preseason. Now this allows my boy Hayden to get a few more of his points. So with JJ, Suckling and Daniel, along with Crozier down there, it makes up a very attacking backline. Does mean that Keith gets to play that more defensive role and allows Crozier to kind of come in and mop up some points there. So I'm looking for him to push into that high 70s, possibly 80s this year. And I did hear during the week that Matt Suckling said he's going to be playing on the wing this year at the Bulldogs. So
that's juicy.
that just means that it could be JJ, Daniel and Crozier back there kind of lapping up those delicious touches.
Yeah, I think a mid-70s average this year to maybe a bit higher, maybe the 78 kind, isn't unreasonable for Hayden Crozier, which, definitely makes him viable for one of your last defender spots. So, I'd monitor a bit more in the pre-season to see what the news of that playing on the wing, how that weighs up and see how that goes. But, look, viable defender option. Like, defender options, really, you can make a case for a lot of them, how hard it is to actually find a good one. So, have a look at him, see how he goes, and he might be a good pickup late in your drafts.
Rightio, your last player for the wrap, Hef.
Yeah, so I'm talking about Mitch Wallace. And look, he's 27 years old now. He's coming into his prime. They reckon 27 is about the prime of your career,
Since
isn't it?
when?
I don't know. I thought that was like when your muscular skeletal peak is and you're at your biggest you're going to be and the fittest you're going to be and all that sort of stuff.
Okay,
I don't
Dr.
know.
Hef.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought I read that somewhere back in year 12 PE, but I'm not sure. He averaged 79 last season. And look, his last 5 years, he's gone at averages of 79, 82, 74, 79, and 89. Looking at his late season numbers from last year as well, he averaged 82 from his last 5 games of 2019. Now, as a forward, he's pretty relevant in keeper league teams. The good thing about him too as well, he attends a lot of centre bounces and he's an elite clearance player for the Bulldogs as well. He's actually just a really important player for the Bulldogs because I think they win a lot of clearances when he's in there as well. Look, if he can stay fit, there's no reason he can't go back to the 80 mark, I think, as well, and be a real handy forward for keeper league teams, especially with the midfield time he's kind of almost guaranteed to get, I think, as well. He's one that's going to be kind of forgotten on the back of, not forgotten, but he's going to be like lowly rated, I think, with missing a few games and I guess the injury concerns over the last few years. What do you think about him?
I think he's just a really handy utility for the Dogs. So having that DPP, I think makes him a bit more valuable than probably what he would be if he was just a mid only. So he's just one who never seems to set a game on fire in terms of 90s or tons or that kind of thing, but just is a genuinely solid high 70s 80s player, which is super good for your forward line. Whether he can go that big 80 plus average, I'm not too sure, but look. Yeah, kind of does fit a good mould. 27, still plenty of life left to him in terms of his career. Just needs to kind of find a bit more footy consistently, but I think he's a solid enough pick for that late forward spot.
All right, that wraps it up for the Western Bulldogs. And now we're going to jump straight into talking about the Keeper League membership system that we've got going on. So basically, if you like the work that we do, you can sign up to become a member to support the podcast. Basically, every bit of money we make just goes back into the podcast to make it bigger and better for listeners. But, as a thank you for doing so, we give away, the State League scores. We scrape all those and put them out. So VFL, Waffle, Neefle, Sandful. You can see how your guys are playing in the seconds each week. We give away the draftee scores. So anyone drafted last year in the 2019 AFL draft, you can see what type of fantasy players they are and draft them to your list, knowing that they'll probably be good fantasy scorers going forward. We've also got the breakout tracker, which allows you to compare any player to the best players in the competition at the same points in their careers. So that helps you out there too. So you can actually make an assessment as who's tracking or trending better than some of the best in the competition and who could be the best future scorers. So at the moment, we've been putting out our rankings and a mini episode to go out with our rankings every Friday. This week we've got forwards coming out, and I guess the big thing that's been the biggest hit over the last few weeks is the Gold Members Facebook group. Now, Kaz, this week we actually had people upgrade their Gold memberships to get into the group. So they were Silver members and they went to upgrade, paid the extra $10 or whatever to get into the Gold members group. So that's how kind of popular it's getting. And again, like every day there's someone posting in their question about their team, everyone helping out with their keepers. I think lots of decisions are made within that group, within the Brains Trust. So you're a big fan of it, Kays, because with your league mates, you can't really. They're not going to help you.
No.
Your league mates aren't going to help you. The guys that that are into fantasy as much as you are probably aren't going to help you with your team. So,
correct.
Yeah.
Someone's always trying to screw you over somehow. So it's nice to have people who are completely unbiased, don't want the worst for you, and you can kind of run through a few ideas in your head with them. So it's a ripper, and obviously there's a few leagues taking off as well through connections in there, which is fantastic. Yeah,
so it's actually a great place to look for new league mates and things like that, or starting a keeper league as well. So look, if you can sign up, like we said, everything goes back in the podcast, and it makes this thing bigger and better. But each week we say thank you to a few Gold members. We do 5 each week. So Kays, who are the 5 that we're thanking this week?
The 5 legends this week in the Gold members group are Lockie Byrne, Gavin Stacey, Mark Crunchy Crane, Rory O'Brien, and Ryan Arms.
All right, thank you to those gold members. If you are keen to sign up, head to keeperleaguepod.com.au or just click the link in the description below for the membership. You'll find your way straight there and you can sign up. Kays, we got a podcast review this week.
Pow.
Yeah.
Nice one.
So this one is from someone called Viscillate, and he wrote, "Yes, just started listening and loving it so far. Not a Keeper League player myself, but still lots of valuable information for salary cap and draft. Chemistry and flow of the podcast is very clean. Love your work, fellas."
Too kind, sir.
That is very kind. I love how people actually saying that we're good at speaking on the mic. It's really weird.
It is. But it is true. I actually do agree with the salary cap kind of hype, even though we don't really talk
Yeah,
about
I also
prices
agree
and
that we're
kind
an
of thing.
awesome product and an awesome podcast. I do agree, Kays.
I was going to get into that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We're awesome for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but like, because we talk about the guys who are, 180 or 200, and, this time of year, especially before round one, you're going to have to come to a few crunch times between who you're selecting between, your cheapies. So hopefully we can shed a bit of light on who might be worth taking and who might be not worth the hype.
Yeah. I was just laughing at that. You agree with the fact that you think your own podcast is good. That's all I was laughing at.
It's good, isn't it? I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'd listen to us.
I don't mind. I'd listen to us if we went us.
If I weren't on it, yeah.
Sure. That's fine. We're actually running out of reviews to actually read out. That was the last one we've got in the bank. So if you feel like being really, really kind and you use an Apple device and you listen through Apple Podcasts, maybe just think about jumping on and giving us a review if you like the show.
Yep.
If you don't like it, don't worry about it. Or you can just give us a bad review. We'll take those too. We need a bit of honesty every now and then. Anything that helps us improve, we're happy with. So, if you got some spare time and use Apple, jump on, give us a review, and we'll be eternally grateful. Thank you. Let's move on to the listener questions. All right, Kays, we're moving on to the listener questions to finish off the show. So each week we answer as many questions as we can that don't, that aren't already covered in our team analysis, segments. So we'll move on through this, Kays. The first question is from Ben Mortimer. Crozier to continue his halfback role, or will he do a lockdown role like the beginning of last year? Ed Richards to resume his halfback spot like his junior years. So two questions there.
Yeah, so obviously we touched on Crozier before. I think Keith's inclusion and a fit Easton Wood means that Crozier plays that more attacking back role. And as I said before, I think Dre being injured helps that go ahead too. With Suckling potentially playing on a wing this year, obviously frees up some more spots back there as well. Now, Ed Richards, I think he's next in line to kind of fill Dre's role. So along with potentially Lewis Young, who's a bit taller, or Bailey Williams, even if he can return to form, could be a chance of that final spot in the back line too. So I'm quite confident Crozier's numbers are going to increase this year. But Ed Richards, I think he's sniffing around the mark, and yes, he did have some good fantasy numbers, I think 3 years ago when he was a kid. So one to monitor for sure.
AJS Hawker asks, 12 team, 5-7-1-5-8 configuration. They keep 13. He wants to know, is Ollie Florent worth keeping, and what do you see him averaging this season as his potential maximum average in the future?
Now, can you say the word Ollie without putting Wines after it?
Yeah, I can. I just when I see Ollie, my brain just goes on autopilot. But I don't own Ollie Wines anymore, so I've rid of him out of my team. So
anyway, we're talking about a better Ollie Florent. Yes, I think he is definitely worth keeping. I'm looking at him to score around the 90 mark this season. For his whole maximum career average, I think he's kind of like that. He can be that 100 kind of player. He's a bit Luke Parkery in terms of, I think he can kind of go forward, impact the scoreboard up there, bit of a bigger frame once he kind of grows into his body. I think he kind of will be that low 100 midfield average once he kind of gets to it. But I don't think there's any reason he can't push into the 90s this year if we can kind of see what he was doing late last year. Bit more responsibility in that midfield, and I think he'll naturally develop quite nicely.
All right, Kays, what's the next question?
Next question is from Matt Nicholas. So, can Nick Nat get through a full season, and how much improvement will we see in Tim English?
Yeah, look, with Nick Nat, we talked about him before. I think he can get through a full season, but he'd have to do that with low time on ground numbers. So that doesn't matter because hopefully his point per minute numbers are enough to jump him back up. So like I said earlier, he could average 80. So that's if he does get through the full season. In terms of Tim English, well, he'd have to start winning some hit outs, I reckon, to see his numbers rise any further because I think he's doing around the ground stuff really well. So it'd be interesting to see if he's bulked up anymore in the off season or how he's actually, working with as a tap ruckman because that's where he'll actually grow pretty quickly if he can actually start winning a few taps because that's just easy ways to get points. So look, he can he can rise. His numbers can rise. He just needs to actually start winning more taps.
All reports out of the Bulldogs is that Tim English is in beast mode at the moment. He is ripped. He's huge. He's ready to go. So
that's what I want to see.
That's very exciting for Tim English owners all around Australia, including myself. Next questions from Tom Agnew. Thoughts on Jordan Dawson breakout potential?
Well, I think in keeper leagues, he already has kind of broken out for keeper leagues because 80 plus is kind of what you're aiming for those kind of defenders.
If you got him, you ain't getting rid of him.
Yeah, exactly. But if you want him to go kind of 90, 100 plus type thing, I think he needs to play midfield. So if him and Lloyd are playing on the opposing, halfback flanks, they're going to affect each other. So, look, if he plays midfield, he can go bang. Whether he does that this season, like Horse is just great for not playing players in their best positions. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm hoping that he sees the light because some of his midfield games, he actually showed he can be an absolute superstar because he can take, grabs up forward. He can take grabs down back. He can, win possessions through the middle. He's actually a gun. He just needs to play in the guts, I think, and actually just let off the chain.
Like everyone else in the Sydney side.
Yeah, and everyone else in the Hoofers side too. Yeah.
Oh, no one cares. Next question. Craig Carter. What's the average draft position for the top 10 rucks?
So I went on big footy. I went on ultimate footy today and I ripped the average draft position for every player in the comp. Look, I'm going to give these away. I'm going to give away a spreadsheet to the gold members in the gold members group. Basically a spreadsheet of all these numbers that updates and things like that. But the issue at the moment is because there's so few, drafts been done and there's a lot of keeper retentions that have been played with the draft picks that are kept with the late picks in the draft. It skews the numbers a little bit.
Yep,
but I can give you the top 10 at the moment, but there's some random ones in here. So Max Gawn's kept, its average draft position is higher than Brodie Grundy. So Max Gawn 1, Brodie Grundy 2, then Jared Witts, then Todd Goldstein, then Rowan Marshall, Riley O'Brien after that. And then coming in next is Matthew Flynn. So that's because someone's obviously kept him somewhere and there's probably been like 2 drafts happening and his average draft position is just stupidly at 87 because that's where they put him in as the keeper spot in the draft selection. So it's a bit weird. But then you got Stephen Martin, Scott Lysett and Ben McAvoy. So this happens every year where you've just got to wait like before, a month before like a lot of drafts get done and then we can actually get a more accurate representation of average draft position because on Ultimate Footy, the keepers going in with late picks and late selections allocated there really screws up the numbers. So.
To be honest, disregard the ADPs there, but that's probably an order that would be pretty similar in terms of most
with
structures.
Matthew Flynn in there.
Apart from Matthew Flynn. So take him out, whack someone else in. But, if you went
Brodie Grundy obviously before Gawn.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's actually quite accurate.
Grundy, Gawn, Witts, Goldstein, Marshall, O'Brien, Martin, Lysett, McAvoy. I think that's a pretty decent order in terms of that.
Yeah. Ask that question again in 3 weeks when some more drafts have been done. We'll get a better idea of what it actually is.
Done. Next question, Hef.
Andrew Kenny asks, I have James Rowbottom on the bubble as a keeper. Is he a hold over any number of 8 random draftees?
Yes, for me. So he's got the runs on the board, opportunity in the side, the junior numbers, yes. And I think when you're talking about going into keeper league drafts, looking at just picking up draftees, there's so much risk involved. Like potentially Matty Rao is going to be a jet and will be one that will stand out straight away. But everyone else, I think that Rowbottom this year is going to be that far ahead of, most of the other pack in terms of the draftees. So I think having that DPP makes him a much more valuable commodity, and I'd be holding him over going into the draft too early.
I would potentially take Rowell over him and maybe Anderson as well, just because the report's coming out from Friday night. Apparently Anderson by some people reckon he was more impressive than Rao just because of, I guess, the quality that he was playing with and against. They reckon as a natural game, Anderson's game probably looked a little bit nicer in terms of fantasy as well. But look, so that's kind of swayed me towards him. So either of those two, I'd probably take before James Rowbottom. But and just because I know they're going to get lots of opportunities up at Gold Coast. I know there's Sydney too, but Sydney just have a better side. So Rowbottom's just going to be down the pecking order a little bit. So maybe one of those two, but then I think James Rowbottom will probably take over the rest of the draftees, I think.
Interesting take. Next question.
Dale Young, thoughts on Quainer? Does he get a gig across Collingwood's back flank this year with Varco out the way?
Well, I definitely think he can slot into their side, but the big question is, will he be a big fantasy scorer? And the answer to that is, I don't think so. So looking back through his junior numbers, he never really notched up anything big. And looking at his VFL numbers last year, averaged a solid 70, which had scores of 2 in the 90s and 107 PB. For me, he's kind of that class player, not a real pig. So potentially kind of slots into a future D4 or 5 position if he can hold that 70, 75 average going forward for Collingwood. But so you could probably make a case for him as that late defender, but it really depends on where you're looking at taking him there. Is he going to be a 80, 90, 100? I don't think so, but will he be a solid 70s? I think so.
I'm surprised you didn't go with the future D1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that range.
I thought about it. I even had D3 to 5 written down here, but I pulled it back to 4, 5 because I was
reined it in a little bit.
Yeah, I just thought I'd be a bit more accountable to myself.
Yeah,
but the games he played in the AFL last year were really good. I really enjoyed watching him play. I just don't know whether he's going to be a real fantasy pig.
Watching his junior career pretty closely, exactly the same thoughts. Quality over quantity type player. He came into the AFL and he was pretty good in his first week. I think he had like 80 or size 70s or something like that. Yep. And everyone was like, oh, this guy's going to be a fantasy jet. But I think that's his like maximum. Yep. He had like the perfect game that he could have done.
Agreed.
And I think you're going to see a lot of lower numbers because like I said, he's more of a quality over quantity type player. You need those back flankers that are just going to rack him up and that sort of stuff. And I don't think he's one of them.
Correct. Next question is from @Sav Brigas. New keeper league. What pick would you be selecting Rosie with?
Yeah, look, it's hard to tell with how many teams are in the league and that stuff. So say if you're like us, you have a 12-team league. It's almost getting to the point from what I saw on the weekend that you start to take him with either your second or your third forward. And I guess the way that I draft, that usually works out. Well, I usually go captain option first, obviously. Then I like to pick up a couple top-range defenders, top-line defenders. That could change this year with the scarcity if I was redrafting. And then I like to go probably a top-line forward, then another couple midfielders, then go back to a forward. So that brings him around about the 7, 8. My 7th or 8th pick is where I try to pick someone like that up. So forward, second forward, third forward, around that range. So I reckon inside your first 10 picks, it's almost Rosie time. Because the thing with Rosie as well, though, I think he's going to be a star. But I don't think he's going to lose forward status, despite him being talked up as a lot of midfield time this year. I think he's going to be too valuable, especially once Gray retires, for them to move him out of there completely. Yeah. So I think Rosie is going to be a forward for a while and going to be a decent scoring one too.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I go that early on him. I think with that type of player, there's always going to be guys that you have a big love for, I suppose, and people will go high with Rosie. People, he might slide. So I'd probably be more pushing back to maybe a 10 to 12 range, 10 to 12. But, that could change. It depends what you're drafting for and that kind of thing.
Like I said, I'll probably revise it. Probably to 8 to 10, not 7. Maybe it's a bit early. But 8 to 10, you think 10 to 12.
Poor bias.
Depends what you're going for. But no, I like picking up positional players early, and I think the younger ones that can actually show they can score fantasy-wise or they're going to get a run through the midfield. I just really like, I know this is biased as Port Adelaide, but I think if you've got a young player that plays for Port Adelaide, they're going to get opportunities at the moment. They're not afraid to throw kids into the midfield and see how they go. So I think you can go all right with a few young Port players.
Sounds like a good reason to keep Ken.
Oh, God, no. Maybe for fantasy. Maybe that's a good thing. I think Port were one of the better fantasy scorers last year, but they couldn't do it on the scoreboard, so it doesn't really matter. At Henry Katz, Will Bailey, the Bulldog Williams, nod to the draft doctors there, get a decent run at this year. I picked him up with my 39th pick in a 40-man squad. Would be stoked if he hits the park regularly this year, but not sure. Beveridge rates him as high as HK Doss does from the draft orders.
So true. Tough one, but I think with Dre out, there's a spot up for grabs. So it does seem like Bevo hates him because he's a great scorer when he gets a chance. I was pretty hot on him the last couple of years, but just hasn't been best 22 the last couple of years. So, and the role that he plays is interesting too. Now, what perplexed me was he re-signed with the Bulldogs when he probably could have explored free agency and gone somewhere else. I did read a report throughout the week that he says he's fitter than ever this preseason and he's looking to play like Easton would. Now, that is not good fantasy-wise. So, if he's trying to model his game on Easton Wood being that, kind of lockdown, sometimes intercept defender, it's not good. But look, at pick 39 out of 40, I think that's a fine place to take him because it's not much risk. So you never know. He could come good, but if he wants to play like Easton Wood, potentially good for his career, but not good for his fantasy numbers.
Isn't Easton Wood a suburb in Melbourne?
No.
Or is it Eastwood?
Probably Eastwood. There's an Eastwood in Adelaide too.
Oh, is there? I'm just thinking if he wants to play like the suburb. I'm not sure. But no, I was just trying to think of any other way that you could not play like Easton Wood, maybe just referring to something else. But no, looks like that's just horrible news for fantasy owners out there. I just don't even see how that works. That's weird. Anyway, Nick Stagno Navarra, can you order the 3 Premier Bulldogs mid? Sorry, I really struggle when there's no full stops and punctuations in things. So, can you order the Bulldogs 3 Premier mids? Do you have them in the same order if it's a keeper league or not?
So, good question here. So, thinking about it today, I would take McRae 1, Dunkley 2, Bont 3. Now, McRae's 25, Dunkley's 23, Bont's 24. So, in terms of age, you're still going to have plenty of good years in all of them. But for me, you just can't beat McRae's pigginess and also his consistency. Like, he just never lets you down. For me, he's also the least likely of the 3 to ever kind of go forward and play that forward line role. Now, we've seen Dunkley play forward a bit before he kind of broke out last year. They seem to throw Bont up forward every now and then when they need him to. So I think regardless of whether it's a redraft or a keeper league, I'd be pretty happy to back in McRae as one. And I think that Dunkley can get off the chain a bit more than Bont. So that's my order. Hef, do you have any disagreements there?
I actually saw this one come through on Facebook and I went to go write in the show doc and answer it, and you'd already answered it in the exact same way I was going to answer it. So, yeah, no, that's
Great
it.
minds think alike.
McRae, same deal, absolute superstar, probably best mid in the competition that you could get. Dunkley is an absolute freak in terms of fantasy because he pushes out those 150s, 160s. I think he sometimes even goes bigger than that. Bont is just really serviceable. He's going to get you 100 each week, but he doesn't have the captain option, I guess, benefit of the other 2, I think. So, yeah, that's the order I'd go with as well.
That's a wrap for tonight, Hef. We're done.
Sweet. That's we're going to keep it to, if we don't ramble on too long, we're going to keep it to under 90 minutes here. So that's really good because we were scared we were going to go way over and make it the longest episode of the season so far. And I think it already is. But anyway, that's it. So if you haven't done so already, check out all our socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Check out the membership stuff we've got going on. Again, links below, but head to keeperleaguepod.com.au if you want to head straight there and check them out now. Next week is the start of the Marsh series. So stay tuned for, hopefully all things go to plan. We'll be putting up some time on ground adjusted numbers, so some points per minute numbers up on our website. So stay tuned for those. We've got 3 more analysis articles coming out on the website for the rest of this week. That's pretty much it. Kay, is anything else to add?
So we've got St Kilda Hawthorn, Bulldogs North, Melbourne Crows, Suns Cats, and Lions Power this week.
Yep.
Which game excites you the most out of fantasy perspective?
From a fantasy perspective, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just keen to have some footy back, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't really care.
I'm very keen to see how the Suns go.
Actually, yeah, that's probably the biggest one. I was just...
Because there's going to be a lot of people watching that game intently going, I've got number 1 pick in my draft, aka me. Do I go with Matt Rao or do you go with someone
decent indication?
Else? Yeah, so it's going to be good to see him play against, and it's a good side too with Geelong. So,
all right,
footy's back, mate.
Cool, it is. And again, thanks to Remedy Kombucha for supplying us with some drinks for the show.
I feel refreshed.
I'm very refreshed, and the gut health feels good. And look, I had no sugar tonight, so I'm going to sleep well. And yeah, I'm very happy with this.
We're so healthy.
I know we are. All right, that wraps it up for another week. We'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.
See ya.